Jamal's heart was pounding as he walked home, his job gone, his future uncertain. Fired for helping a stranger. Welcome to our channel, where stories of kindness, courage, and unexpected miracles come alive. If you love inspiring tales that remind us of the power of good deeds, you've found the right place. Be sure to subscribe and join our growing community. Jamal was a kind-hearted, hard-working boy who always tried to do the right thing. At only 14 years old, he understood the importance of responsibility. After school, he worked at the local grocery store to help his mom, who was struggling to make ends meet. Jamal's father had passed away a few years ago, and since then, it had just been him, his mom, and his younger sister. Every dollar he earned made a difference, and he took pride in his job, always treating customers with kindness. One afternoon, as his shift was nearing its end, Jamal noticed an older man struggling with his bags near the exit. The man was clearly having trouble. His movements were slow, and he was using a cane to balance himself while trying to push his shopping cart with one hand. Jamal knew it was time for him to clock out, but something tugged at his heart. He couldn't just leave the man to struggle. So without a second thought, he walked over. "Do you need some help, sir?" Jamal asked, his voice gentle. The elderly man looked up, surprised but grateful. "I could use a hand, son. My legs aren't what they used to be." Jamal smiled and began helping the man load the heavy grocery bags into the trunk of his car. It took a little time, but Jamal didn't mind. The man chatted with him, telling him how nice it was to see a young person who still cared enough to help someone in need. Jamal's heart warmed at the kind words, and he was glad he had stayed to assist. After the man thanked him and drove away, Jamal quickly rushed back inside the store. He knew he had taken longer than he should have, but he didn't think it would be a big deal. After all, helping people was part of the job, wasn't it? As soon as he walked through the door, though, his boss, Mr. Clark, was standing there, arms crossed, glaring at him. Mr. Clark was a strict, no-nonsense man who ran the grocery store like a drill sergeant. He didn't tolerate what he considered wasted time, and Jamal could already tell he was in trouble. "Where have you been, Jamal?" Mr. Clark's voice was sharp, almost like a whip. "You were supposed to clock out 10 minutes ago." Jamal hesitated, trying to explain. "I was just helping a customer, an older man who needed help with his groceries. I didn't mean to be late, sir." Mr. Clark's frown deepened. "Helping a customer? Or were you just wasting time outside? This isn't your first warning, Jamal. I can't have employees wandering around whenever they feel like it." Jamal's heart sank. He wasn't wandering around. He had only been trying to do the right thing. "But I was just trying to help." "I don't care," Mr. Clark interrupted, his voice cold. "I've had enough. You're fired. Go home." Jamal's world seemed to stop for a moment. Fired. His chest tightened as the words hit him. He couldn't believe it. He had done something good, something right, but now he was being punished for it. He wanted to protest, but one look at Mr. Clark's face told him there was no point. With his head hung low and his heart heavy, Jamal gathered his things and quietly walked out of the store. As he made his way home, tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. How was he going to explain this to his mom? How could he help his family if he couldn't even keep his job? All the while, a single thought kept running through his mind. "I did the right thing, didn't I?" Jamal walked home slowly, his feet dragging along the sidewalk as the weight of the day pressed down on him. The bright afternoon sun was warm on his skin, but inside, he felt cold. He had been fired for doing something good, something he thought was the right thing to do. The unfairness of it all made his chest feel tight, and he could barely keep his emotions in check. As he approached his front door, his mind raced with thoughts about how he was going to explain everything to his mom. She depended on him to help with the bills. It wasn't much, but every little bit counted, and now he had lost the one thing he could do to help his family. How would she react? Would she be disappointed in him? He didn't want to let her down, but what else could he have done? Should he have ignored the old man and let him struggle with his groceries just to avoid being late? The thought didn't sit right with Jamal. He knew deep down that he had done the right thing, but knowing that didn't make the pain of losing his job any easier. When he stepped into the house, his mom was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Hey, Jamal. How was work today?" Jamal swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Mom, something happened." His mom's smile faded, concern filling her eyes. She set down the spoon she was holding and walked over to him. "What's wrong, baby?" Jamal took a deep breath, his voice barely above a whisper. "I got fired." His mom's eyes widened in surprise. "Fired? What happened?" Jamal quickly explained how he had helped the older man with his groceries, how it had made him late, and how Mr. Clark had fired him without even giving him a chance to explain. As he spoke, his voice wavered with frustration and sadness. When he finished, he looked up at his mom, waiting for her reaction. For a moment, she was silent, her face thoughtful. Then she pulled Jamal into a hug, holding him close. "I'm so sorry, Jamal. That's so unfair." Jamal felt a lump form in his throat as he fought back tears. "I didn't want to lose my job, Mom. I was just trying to help." "I know, sweetheart," his mom said softly. "And you did the right thing. Helping people is never wrong, even if some people don't see it that way." Her words brought some comfort, but the sting of losing his job still lingered. Jamal pulled away from the hug, looking down at the floor. "But now, I can't help with the bills. What are we going to do?" His mom gave him a reassuring smile. "We'll be okay. You don't have to carry that burden alone. We'll figure something out." Jamal nodded, but the knot in his stomach remained. He knew his mom was trying to stay positive for his sake, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had let her down. The whole situation felt unfair. He had done what was right, yet he was the one being punished. It just didn't make sense. That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Jamal's thoughts swirled with worry and doubt. The more he thought about it, the angrier he felt. How could someone be fired for being kind? He had only tried to help, and now everything felt like it was falling apart. But even as the frustration simmered inside him, a small part of him still believed in what his mom had said. Doing the right thing was never wrong, no matter what anyone else thought. Still, he couldn't help but wonder, what was going to happen now? Would he ever find another way to help his family? And why did life have to be so unfair? The next morning, Jamal woke up feeling restless. He had barely slept the night before, his mind constantly replaying the events at the grocery store. The unfairness of it all still weighed heavily on him, and the uncertainty of what was going to happen next gnawed at him. His family needed his help, and now he felt powerless. As he got dressed and went into the kitchen, he found his mom making breakfast. She smiled at him, trying to keep the mood light, but Jamal could still see the worry in her eyes. He sat down at the table, quietly eating his cereal, when there was a sudden knock on the door. "Jamal, can you get that?" his mom called from the stove. Jamal stood up and went to the door, wondering who it could be so early in the morning. When he opened it, a man in a neat suit stood on the doorstep, holding an envelope. Jamal blinked in surprise. He didn't recognize the man, but there was something familiar about him. "Are you Jamal?" the man asked. Jamal nodded, unsure of what this was all about. "Yeah, that's me." The man handed him the envelope with a warm smile. "This is for you. I think it'll make your day." Before Jamal could ask any more questions, the man turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway, staring at the envelope in his hands. Confused and curious, Jamal slowly opened it, pulling out a letter inside. His eyes widened as he began to read. The letter was from the man he had helped at the grocery store, the older man with the cane. But what Jamal didn't know, what no one had told him, was that this man was no ordinary customer. He was Mr. William Harris, a wealthy businessman known throughout the city. In the letter, Mr. Harris wrote about how touched he had been by Jamal's kindness, how rare it was to see someone go out of their way to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. The letter went on to explain that Mr. Harris had been so impressed with Jamal's character that he wanted to offer him something life-changing, a full scholarship to a prestigious private school. Mr. Harris believed that someone like Jamal, with his heart and sense of responsibility, deserved every opportunity to succeed, and he was willing to help make that happen. Jamal's hand shook as he held the letter, barely able to believe what he was reading. A scholarship to a private school. It didn't make sense. Why would someone do something like this for him? He rushed back into the kitchen, his heart pounding. "Mom, you have to read this," he exclaimed, handing her the letter. His mom wiped her hands on a towel and took the letter from him. As she read it, her eyes widened in shock, tears welling up in them. She looked at Jamal, speechless for a moment, and then pulled him into a tight hug. "Oh, Jamal," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Jamal could hardly believe it himself. One small act of kindness, something he had done without a second thought, had turned his world upside down in the best possible way. It wasn't just about the scholarship. It was the realization that doing the right thing, even when it seemed to come at a cost, had brought something incredible into his life. His heart swelled with gratitude as he thought back to the moment when he had decided to help Mr. Harris with his groceries. He had been punished for it, but now everything had changed. His future was bright, and it was all because of a simple act of kindness. Jamal realized that sometimes, even when things seem unfair, the universe has a way of rewarding those who follow their hearts. "You said," the day after receiving the letter from Mr. Harris, Jamal's life began to change in ways he never thought possible. Sitting in the kitchen with his mom, the letter spread out on the table between them. He still couldn't believe it. The words were right there, but it felt almost like a dream. A dream where one simple act of kindness had opened the door to a brighter future. His mom kept reading the letter over and over, tears of joy in her eyes. "You see, Jamal," his mom said, her voice trembling with emotion, "doing good, even when no one's watching, always comes back to you. This is proof of that." Jamal nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that he hadn't felt since the day he lost his job. But now, the job didn't seem like such a big loss anymore. He had something far more important, a second chance, a path to a better future. Later that afternoon, Jamal received another surprise. Mr. Clark, the grocery store manager who had fired him, showed up at his house. His usually stern face seemed softer, and he looked uncomfortable, as though he were struggling to find the right words. Jamal stood in the doorway, unsure of what to expect. "Jamal," Mr. Clark began, his voice quieter than usual. I've made a mistake." Jamal blinked in surprise. This was the last thing he had expected. Mr. Clark cleared his throat awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot. "I received a letter from Mr. Harris, the man you helped. He told me what happened that day, and he praised you for your kindness. I didn't realize what you were doing when I fired you, and I regret it now." Jamal stood silently, processing what Mr. Clark was saying. He had never thought he'd hear an apology from his boss, but here it was. "I want to offer you your job back, if you're willing to return," Mr. Clark continued. "Not only that, but we'll increase your pay. It's the least I can do after the way I treated you." Jamal thought for a moment. A part of him wanted to refuse, to walk away from the job that had caused him so much pain. But then he remembered what his mom always said. People make mistakes, and sometimes they deserve a second chance. Just like Mr. Harris had given him a second chance at a brighter future, maybe Mr. Clark deserved one too. "Thank you, Mr. Clark," Jamal said slowly, "but I think I'm ready to move on. I have a new opportunity now, thanks to Mr. Harris, but I appreciate your offer." Mr. Clark nodded, looking relieved but also respectful of Jamal's decision. "I understand," he said, "and I wish you all the best. You've got a bright future ahead of you, Jamal. With that, Mr. Clark left and Jamal felt a sense of closure. He didn't need to hold on to the hurt anymore. His future was wide open, and the possibilities were endless. The following week, Jamal and his mom met with Mr. Harris at his office downtown. Mr. Harris was warm and friendly, his eyes twinkling as he shook Jamal's hand. "You have a bright future ahead of you, young man," Mr. Harris said. "I'm glad I was able to help you get there. But it was your character, your kindness, that opened the door. Always remember that." Jamal smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. This opportunity was more than just a scholarship. It was a reminder that being kind, even when it seems to go unnoticed, has the power to change lives. As Jamal left Mr. Harris's office, he knew his life would never be the same. He had learned a powerful lesson. Doing good, even when it seems like no one is watching, always matters. And sometimes, the rewards come in the most unexpected ways. With hope in his heart and a bright future ahead, Jamal was ready to embrace this new beginning. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey. If this story inspired you, don't leave without subscribing and letting us know where you're watching from in the comments below.